our shop. I'll pick the story. Welcome back to our shop just outside of Kennesaw here in North Georgia. Today's project is going to be the cosmetic restoration of this Singer sewing machine on cabinet. As you know, these are kind of a popular antique. They don't bring a whole lot of money. This one belongs to a family member who's asked me to do a cosmetic restoration on it. By that, she wants it to look good, but she's not going to use it. So knowing that, knowing where her mind is, makes it very, very much easier for me to decide on a course of action. This thing has a lot of things wrong with it. I'll bring you in and show them to you here in just a minute as soon as I can get Stuart back on the floor. Good boy. And here's the top. You see we've got some missing veneer here. On the top of the lid, I'm going to do my best to kind of get you this in raking light, but can you see this wrinkled veneer here? Obviously there was a plant or something that sat there for years. Now there's two ways to fix this. The first way is to try to heat this up, maybe with an iron, and see if you can reactivate the glue and press it back down. In my experience, when I've had damage like this that's so old, and there's also a chance that the substrate has been wrinkled, I haven't had a whole lot of luck with that. I haven't had a whole lot of luck injecting glue underneath here and then clamping it, trying to get it flat again. So I'm thinking that this piece of veneer on the top of this lid is going to come off, and I'll replace it with a new piece of oak, and then use what I can of this to patch some of the veneer repairs around. But we've got veneer repairs here, we've got ink stains here. As I bring you over here, there's more veneer repairs here. Dropping down to the drawers, they're in okay shape. We have a broken drawer support here and a broken drawer support here. This entire assembly has got to be obviously reattached. When you look at the treadle assembly, it's all here, but it's dirty, and there are places where the paint is chipping. It's chipped off in here. So what I think I'm going to do with all the cast iron pieces is just disassemble the entire thing, wire brush it, and spray paint it in a black, like a Rust-Oleum, and that'll make it nice and shiny and fresh looking for her. I know there are techniques where you can use the compound that stabilizes rust on it. That will darken it, but that doesn't give any lasting protection, and I think for what she wants out of this restoration, I think spray painting a black linoleum, a black Rust-Oleum is the way to go. Drop down drawer works. The underneath here is a large piece of plywood that acts kind of like a belly to protect the sewing machine, and I hope you can see here. I know it's getting a little bit dark, but this is all completely delaminated. This whole piece has to come out and be worked on. And then if we open up the cabinet, you can see we have, obviously the finish is damaged here. We have worn finish here, missing veneer here. When we flip open this portion of the cabinet, you can see that we've got this plywood here is completely delaminated, and there's all sorts of missing wood on the inside. And then if we lift up the machine, you can see that we have rust on this wheel. It's just filthy and been neglected for many, many years. Take you around back, and you can see the state of this. This really is just going to get cleaned and polished. I'm not going to even attempt to paint it because of all this beautiful gold work here that has to be preserved. So we're just going to clean this off and maybe wax it. You can see here how beautiful these decorations are. And then bring it to the back. Finish is completely worn, and there's a few broken pieces. Singer sewing machines and these Treadle sewing machines, my understanding is they were kind of like the miracle thing of the late 1800s, early 1900s. Prior to this, women were sewing by hand, and Singer came out with this machine that allowed them to do it with a machine. These were mass produced during the Industrial Revolution and really revolutionized the homeowner of that day, the woman of the house's life. So they were really treasured. Singer and some other companies, Unique, I believe Jones was over in England, mass produced these by the millions, and it just seems like almost every family has one stored away in their basement somewhere. It was grandma's sewing machine for our generation, for my kids' generation, great-grandmas, and for their kids, great-great-grandmas. So these things are getting old. If you have one and you're curious about dating it, on the Singers, there's a serial number right here on a plate, and if you can read this one, begins with a G, and if you Google dating Singer sewing machines, you'll come to a number of websites that have these serialized dating charts, and this one dates from 1910, so it's 106 years old, and by the looks of things, it has never been restored. It appears to have the original finish still on it, and dirt from a million years. Look at that, isn't that pretty? So anyways, we're going to get started on this. What we're going to do is disassemble the base from the rest of the sewing machine. We'll take the sewing machine head out, set that aside, and we'll work on the wood and on the metal separately. And I'll bring you in and we'll do a step-by-step on this and see how it comes out. I've got the machine tipped up as far as it'll go. I wanted to show you how this is held in there. I'm holding a flashlight so you can see. But these metal, let's try this one here, it might be easier for you to see. These metal dogs, there's basically a hinged little metal post, slide into this recess in the base of the sewing machine, and it's held in with this lock screw, which I guess you can see right there. So what we have to do is loosen both those screws, and then we lift the machine straight up off the dogs, and we'll set it aside. Here's the underside of the machine itself, and it's just beautiful. It's cast iron. There's all still original. Look at the condition of the brass. It's 106 years old. It's just remarkable, the quality that they were able to work into mass-produced homeowner level items back in the day, and that's why they're still around today. It's just amazing. Hats off to them all. Okay, let's get this off. And here's a close-up of the mounting assembly. You can see this is screwed into the cabinet with a single screw, and then on a pivot is this little dog with a recess here for the set screw. That's what holds the machine on, and has held that machine on for over 100 years. Okay, one of the things that we're going to have to focus on in this restoration, all this hardware has to come off, and we have to make sure we know how to get it back on. So since I suffer from CRS, which is can't remember squat syndrome, I'm going to be marking these things and bagging them to help me when it comes time to put things back together. So I'll bring you back and we start to strip this off. This is one of those little things that you need to take note of when you disassemble anything. The screws that were on the lid side of that hinge are 1/4 inch. The screws that are on the cabinet side of that hinge are at least 1 inch. We got to make sure that we make note of that. Nothing worse than putting this together a couple of days later and running this long screw through the wrong side and damaging the lid. So stuff like this you got to watch out for. I'll keep disassembling this piece and bring you back. There's kind of an interesting little aside. Someone had done a prior veneer repair on here. Not the best with the veneer overhanging the sides and the cracks and all, but hey, at least they tried, and it looks like they replaced the original veneer because you can see this grain pattern continues straight through. Just kind of cool. Okay, we've got the lid assembly and this front flip-up assembly removed and stored away. The only other piece of hardware that's here is the spring hinge for the sewing machine. And for now I'm going to leave this in place rather than try to unbolt it and run the risk of having the spring uncoil or something. I can work around that. If I have to take it off, I will. So the next step now is to flip this up on its top, and we'll pull off the cast iron base. I've also removed the drawers, and everything is up here labeled and organized. So next step is to flip the table up onto the sewing machine up onto the workbench, and we'll start taking off the cast iron. And with the machine flipped up on its base, you can see or flipped up on its top, you can see the cast iron is held in with 4 very large screws in each corner, and they're buried down here pretty tight. But you can also see that the drawer assembly racks are held in with screws as well as I thought there was a clamp here. So anyways, I think the best thing to do is to take off the drawer assemblies as units, and that'll give us better access to the screws that hold the cast iron in. And now we've got to make sure that we mark these drawer assemblies so we get them back the right way as well. Okay, that's the next step. Drawer assemblies are coming off. And we're getting ready to pull off the screws that hold the cast iron base to the underside of the cabinet. And you can see these things are fairly gigantic. I have this fairly gigantic old Marple screwdriver. I think I've talked a bit before that I love these old screwdrivers for working on old stuff because it just seems that it fits better. And it's the biggest one I've got, and it's going to do a great job. So we'll pull these off and I'll show you what it looks like when it's off. Okay, she's unscrewed. Let's see how we get her off. Gotta be careful that when I lift this up I don't hit and break this this little frame that the machine sits in when it's down inside the cabinet. So we'll lift it straight up and set it straight down. Here we go, first time off in 100 years. Just like that. Okay, so we've got these L brackets here that hold in the little cabinet for the sewing machine. And then we've got one more tricky little thing here, is that we have to get off this front door. Now at first blush you'd think that if we could take those 2 screws off of the hinge, we just remove the drawer, but the problem is you can't get a screwdriver in there as far as I can tell. We may have to take the screws off that hold the mounting block first, but I'm going to try to get I think maybe if I lift that up I might be able to get a screwdriver in there right along in there, and that'll make life a little easier. Alright, well anyways, we're going to take off the drawer. We're going to take off the, I don't know what you call this thing, this little underside case where the machine rests. And then we will have this fairly well disassembled, and then we will start disassembling the treadle assembly and get to work bringing this old girl back. And with that round, I'm going to call it the garage for the sewing machine, off, we can see here that the spring assembly is just held on with 4 screws. And it has an adjuster here where you could loosen this nut and then tighten the spring if your machine is not going down the way you want. I don't see any reason not to take this off. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I mean, the worst it'll do is spring forward here. I don't see the spring coming off, and if it does, it's just going to be this portion here which runs in this channel, and getting this off is probably going to be the thing to do so we can clean it and service it. And we could definitely leave it and refinish with it on, but then we're going to have to mask it and all. And the other thing is that this raised lip here, this raised piece, appears to be screwed on from the back. Now whether or not it's got glue on it or not, I don't know. I don't see any reason whatsoever to remove it. We're going to refinish that in place. We're just going to leave that where it is. But let's take off this hinge mechanism. And as you can see, there's a little bit of looseness there anyway, so we want to take a look at that if those holes need to be taken care of. So we'll pull this off and pray for the best. And this spring assembly came off no problem whatsoever. Glad we took it off. There's the screws that it came out with. It's kind of interesting for 1910. When I see these screws, I always look, expect it would be more of a high carbon steel look. Focus, please, rather than this chrome look. But when you look up at the top of the screw, you can see some of the pitting you would expect in high carbon screws. And then when you look down from the top, it sure does look like old hardware. There's a shim of some kind under the hinge. It's kind of a felt piece. I'll be keeping that to in case we need that for when we remount it. So there we go. All we've got left is this pivoting front bobbin drawer, and we'll have this thing apart. Okay, here it is. She's all stripped off. I just hope I remember how to put it back together. But there you go. And there's the core. So, plywood, as you would expect. Nothing wrong with that old-time plywood. Look how thick those plies are there. We have the base upside down. You can see there's metal wheels, except we have one missing here. That's going to be a bit of a challenge, but we'll deal with that later on. Take a look at the assembly, how it works. The treadle pivots on these two joints here, and by moving your foot up and down, you move this pitman arm, and I think this is like a ball and socket joint right here. You can see the pitman arm right there on the bent connecting rod. It makes a circle, which turns the flywheel, which drives the belt that makes the sewing machine go up and down. As far as mounts go, just so we have a little bit better idea what we're doing when we go to put it back together, those are the mounts for the treadle. There's the mount for the treadle assembly on the one side. Here's the mount for the frame piece that holds everything together, the piece that says Singer. Interestingly enough, on the other side is an empty mount. So we need to make sure that we mount this on the right side. And it's on the side that says the Singer. The Singer. So it's on that side as we put this back together. You can see here there's rust and peeling paint. This is why we wanted to wire brush this off. And on the other side, we'll spin around to the front of the machine. These arms are for the belt. This piece here is called a dress guard or a skirt guard. It was designed to, when the lady sat at the machine, that her dress wouldn't tangle up in the flywheel. And we'll see how that's connected up here and just in that one spot. So the real challenge for us is not so much getting it apart, but making sure we get it back together in the right spot, right ways. See that flywheel mount right here. And a lot of what I'm recording here is for my own edification, so I can go back and look at it just in case I get messed up, which I almost promise you I will when it comes time to putting this thing back together. Alright, my understanding is these bolts and nuts here is that you don't unscrew them with a screw. They're kind of like the assemblies that you use to adjust the valves on a motor, where you back off the nut to take it out, and then you can make the fine adjustments here with the nut loose, and then you cinch the nut back down, tighten things up. And that's the nut for the assembly here. Alright, fingers crossed I get this apart. I'm not too concerned about getting it apart, it's getting it back together. I have a tendency to forget a lot. Alright, we'll bring you back when it gets time to get going. Okay, to bring you in, here's the pitman arm joint, and sure enough it's a ball and socket. 100 years old and it still pivots. Remarkable. And here's the interesting manner in which the treadle plate is assembled. It has these tapered bolts that go into these holes, and then you adjust the tension by running the bolt in with the screw thread and the screw slot at the end of it, and then when you get it where you want it, you lock it down with these nuts, these lock nuts. So far so good. We'll keep going. Share with you something here. There's the pitman arm. Can you see inside look at the bearings, the little roller bearings that are in there. Isn't that amazing? Now we can take this off by loosening this key and bringing this out. I'm not 100% sure I want to do that with those roller bearings in there. I don't want to have them falling out, but we'll make a decision on that later. Okay, we applied a little PB blaster, which is it's basically a break loose compound for seized up bolts. It has some kind of a catalyst in it, or an acid or something, but it works really well, a little bit better than WD-40 does. My first experience with this, I was under a car using it, and it dripped into my ear. You don't want that to happen, trust me. But anyways, once I had the PB blaster in there, I actually used a pair of vice grips on the outside of this so I wouldn't mar the slot of the screw. And with the vice grips and the PB blaster, it came right off. There was no even for heat. So we should be able to get this apart. That's the assembly that the treadle assembly mounts to, the treadle assembly and flywheel. That's the cross piece. There's the two side legs. There's the dress guard. There's the treadle plate. And there's the flywheel and pitman arm assembly. Pretty simple. 106 years old, and they are in great shape. Okay, there's the metal all taken apart. Excuse me while I swing you around. There's all our hardware. There's all our wood. We got plenty of work ahead of us. Bring you back when we get on to the next step. Well, I've decided to start working on some of the veneer issues before we get into stripping, because some of this veneer stuff is pretty significant, and if I start stripping and scraping, I'm going to be tearing this stuff off and apart and breaking it. But this is that underside, I guess I'll call it the garage, that the sewing machine rests in when the cabinet is closed, and it has significant delamination issues all across it, all through the body of it, and all the way to the other side. It's really badly delaminated. I'm going to try to glue it all back together, and I've already formulated a clamping plan in my head as how I'm going to clamp it, and I'll try to glue it. You can see there how bad this is. This is just completely coming apart, and I've cleaned it, so it's ready, but this is going to take quite a bit of glue and quite a few clamps and cauls to get this pulled tight. But I'm going to give this a try. That way we can save the original. If it does not work, I can replace it with a piece of, I think it's 1/8 inch plywood, but it's it's only designed as a dust cover, so it's very flimsy, and it's obviously 106-year-old wood that's been delaminated for years, probably got stored in the basement like most of these things did, and there wasn't that much there anyways to start with. But I'm going to try to glue this all back together so we can preserve the original. If it turns into a complete disaster, we'll take this piece off, and I'll try to bend a piece of that real thin underlayment plywood. They sell it in metrics. It's, I don't know, a couple of millimeters thick. They use it for under tiles, but I'd rather keep the original. So we're going to try to glue this up. So when I bring you back, you'll see how we made out. But you can see here that this entire whole sheet on the top has come off, and it's just all falling apart. So fingers crossed, we'll get it back together. Well, let's see how we did. It's a curved surface. I don't have any bending plywood to use as cauls, so what I try to do is get the most out of the straight areas that I could, and hopefully by pushing the straight areas in, we're pulling these in. We're going to have some wrinkling in the middle, I think, probably when we take these clamps off, but I should be able to get them flat along the edges for cosmetic purposes. The whole purpose of this is just to return the structure to this curved piece of plywood, which was just falling apart, and I think we're going to be able to do that. And again, remember, there's no structural need for this. It acts solely as a dust cover, so I think this was the right way to handle this. Let's move on to some other stuff. And this is one of the drawer boxes, and we've got two missing brads here, two missing brads at the top, and a missing brad down at the bottom. I don't have any of these old brads. I don't think. I'll take a look with the rounded heads. I'll get the best ones I can, but what I'm going to do for structural purposes is to put this back together with glue and clamps, and then we'll put the brads in for decoration. But that's what's gonna hold this together, is the glue and clamps. So that's the next step. We got this side to do. We got to break right there. We've got it fixed. And we look okay over here. So we got this one and this one, so we'll get going on the repairs to those. Okay, we've got all the delamination issues under clamps now. This was the fold-out piece that was so badly delaminated. That's been glued back down. Give us a start on repairing that. And then you saw me do this garage earlier. Also, while I was working on that, excuse me for zinging you around, we took the drawer mechanisms, the drawer cases I guess you'd call them, and went through them and did all the repairs, the cracks and loose joints, loose nails, and got those all squared away. So there's all the repairs now are done, with the exception of the veneer inlays and on our lid here. We're going to take this off. We're going to take off this entire piece of veneer, and whatever's left that we can salvage we'll use to inlay in the other places where we have missing veneer. And then we're going to lay a piece of oak on top of this. Just got to double check to make sure my oak's big enough. So that'll be the next step. So here's how we're going to get this veneer off. I'm going to use the heat gun, get underneath it, activate the glue or deactivate the glue, and work some scrapers up in there and try to strip this whole thing off in one piece. I've got the anvil back here if you can see it, so I've got something to push against. And let's go. By using the heat gun and the scraper, we were able to break this loose from its glue. Let's take a look, see what we've got here. Alright. Well, this is interesting. This is the oak veneer that we removed, and you can see where this water spot had soaked all the way through and all the way through to the substrate here. There was absolutely no glue left there, so had we heated that up and tried to remelt that, it would have been a total failure. There's just no glue there. Interesting here how they piece the veneers together with tape. I'm sure there's a seam here somewhere. That's kind of cool. But most interesting to me is the fact that the board underneath is oak. And you ask yourself, well, why did they put the veneer on there? And the answer is right here. The seams are not in the oak veneer. The seams are in the board, and they didn't want those seams to show, so they put glue tape over it and then laid the veneer over top of it, so you had one solid top with no seams. That's really cool. The other thing, if we were just to sand this off and use the solid oak board as our top, we would not only have the 1, 2, 3, 4 boards with different colors and all to deal with, but the veneer, the grain would be running in the wrong direction for the rest of the top. The grain on the veneer is running this way, and the grain on the boards is running this way. So we'll go ahead and we'll put a piece of oak veneer on here. Another interesting thing, I know the finish was tough to see through, but there's no finish on this side. We're not talking about a piece of quarter sawn oak veneer. This is just regular oak veneer. There's no quarter sawn, there's no medullary ray flakes. So we can go ahead and just cover this with a piece of oak veneer, which I have a whole roll of, and we'll be fine. So we'll sand this, lightly sand this, we'll cut our veneer, and we will prepare to put it on. I'm going to use contact cement for a piece this big rather than try to glue it, because I just don't have a way to clamp it properly. If I had a vacuum system, I could get a vacuum bag on it, I would use yellow glue. It's just easier, but we'll use contact cement and rollers, and that's how we'll get the new veneer on. We're making great progress, and look at that piece of old 100-year-old oak veneer that we have for this project and other ones. It came off nicely. Okay, I'll bring you back. Okay, I've cut out a piece of oak veneer out of a sheet. This is paper-backed oak veneer, and the sheet has been curled up for a long time, rolled up, and there's a little bit of curl in this. So I'm kind of just letting it stretch out. I've tried to bend it backwards and all, but I cut it, oversized enough so that when I lay this on here, I don't have to worry too much about where the edges are going to line up. With contact cement, you coat the two mating surfaces independently. You let it set up for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you put it on, and then you roll it out with a J roller. You want to make sure that your surfaces are both glossy. That'll tell you that you're ready to contact them. And you have to be real careful when you lay the piece on, because once it touches, and it's bonded to it. These things here are actually scuba diving weights that I picked up at a yard sale, and they're handy as heck for holding stuff down when you're working on things. So the next step for us is to take this veneer off, and you can see the spring that's in it. It's going to make it a little bit challenging to get it on here, but it's not dreadful, but it's enough that it's annoying. And here's the substrate, which I lightly sanded. Now this thing does have some waviness in it, like there's a bump right here, and there's a divot right here. And I can't, this thing's 100 years old. I can't get this perfectly smooth, and I'm not sure I want to, but I think it's ready for the application of the veneer. If I start trying to sand this so it's perfectly flat, I'm going to wind up with divots and just a horrible mess. So I think it's okay like this, but it looks to me to be ready. So we will get ready to coat these and see if we can get it on. So here we are with a little bit of sanding and trimming. We got a new top on that, a new piece of veneer on that lid. Kind of giving you an idea what I did. You can use a laminate trim cutter to cut veneer to length, but on this piece here, because it's sloped, there wouldn't be a good place for the bearing to ride to cut. So what I did is I took across the grain, I took the chisel and just worked it, laid it right on this line and just worked it back and forth this way. And then with the grain, it was obviously much easier just to take the chisel and push it right along. And then we just took and did some sanding, and we're in business. So that's how we laminated the veneer on the top. And we have the old veneer left, and we're going to start doing some veneer patches right now.